What if the most famous secret agent in the world wasn't just a fictional character? What if James Bond was real, and his most dangerous mission wasn't against international criminals or foreign spies, but protecting the very heart of the British monarchy itself? Deep within the walls of Buckingham Palace, where tourists see only ceremony and tradition, a different world exists. A world where royal protection officers carry more than ceremonial weapons, where every smile hides potential threats, and where the line between public service and personal loyalty becomes dangerously blurred. This is the untold story of Marcus Sterling, a man whose double O designation was earned not in the casinos of Monte Carlo or the back alleys of Prague, but in the drawing rooms and private chambers of the royal family. A story where protocol meets peril, where ancient traditions clash with modern dangers, and where one man's dedication to crown and country will test every principle he holds dear. From the glittering state dinners where assassins hide among ambassadors, to the quiet moments when a young prince makes choices that could destroy a kingdom, this is a tale that reveals the hidden world behind the crown, where every handshake could be deadly, every photograph might reveal secrets worth killing for, and where the greatest enemy might not be a foreign power, but the truth itself. Welcome to a world where being royal means being a target, where duty demands impossible sacrifices, and where one agent will discover that protecting the crown means confronting the darkest secrets of those who wear it. The rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of the black Bentley as it wound through the narrow streets of London's financial district. Marcus Sterling adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous habit he had never quite managed to shake despite 15 years in Her Majesty's Secret Service. The midnight summons to Buckingham Palace was unusual, even by his standards. Marcus had been enjoying a rare evening off at his Mayfair flat when the encrypted phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to Sir Reginald Crawford, the Queen's private secretary, a man whose calls typically preceded either a knighthood or a funeral. Tonight, the urgency in Crawford's voice suggested neither celebration nor mourning, but something far more complex. "Agent Sterling," Crawford had said, his voice tight with controlled panic, "we have a situation that requires your particular expertise." "The palace. 1 hour. Tell no one." As the Bentley passed through the palace gates, Marcus noticed the unusual number of armed officers positioned at strategic points. These weren't the ceremonial guards that tourists photographed, but serious men and women with serious weapons, their eyes scanning for threats that the public would never know existed. The car stopped at a side entrance Marcus had used many times before. Sarah Mitchell, deputy head of Royal Protection, met him at the door. Her usually perfect blonde hair showed signs of stress, and her green eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much in too little time. "Marcus," she said, falling in a step beside him as they walked through corridors lined with priceless paintings, "we have a problem. Actually, we have several problems, and they're all connected to Princess Catherine." Princess Catherine, the Queen's youngest granddaughter, was 25 years old and possessed what the tabloids called a dangerous combination of beauty, intelligence, and complete disregard for protocol. She had graduated from Cambridge with degrees in both international relations and computer science, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had once punched a paparazzi photographer who had gotten too close to a children's hospital she was visiting. "What's she done now?" Marcus asked, though he suspected this went beyond her usual adventures and diplomatic incidents. "She's disappeared," Sarah said simply. 3 days ago. We've kept it quiet, told the press she's suffering from a minor illness, but, Marcus, she didn't just wander off. Someone took her." They reached Crawford's office, a room that had seen the planning of royal weddings, state funerals, and international crises. Tonight, it looked like a war room. Maps covered one wall, computers hummed with encrypted communications, and a dozen of Britain's most elite security personnel worked with the focused intensity of people fighting an invisible war. Crawford looked up from a stack of photographs as they entered. He was a tall, thin man whose gray beard couldn't quite hide the sharp intelligence in his dark eyes. "Agent Sterling, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm afraid we're dealing with something unprecedented. Marcus took the photographs Crawford handed him. They showed Princess Catherine at various royal functions over the past 6 months, but someone had marked each image with red circles around specific individuals in the background. Different faces, different occasions, but as Marcus studied them, he began to see the pattern. These people, he said, pointing to the circled faces, they're not random attendees. Precisely, Crawford confirmed. We've identified at least 12 different operatives who have gained access to royal events over the past 6 months. Different identities, impeccable credentials, but all connected to the same organization. Which organization? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would complicate his life considerably. Sarah placed another file on the desk. That's where it gets interesting. They're not foreign agents, terrorists, or common criminals. They're private military contractors working for Blackstone Security Solutions. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Blackstone was one of the world's largest private security firms, with contracts spanning from protecting oil executives in Nigeria to providing cybersecurity for Fortune 500 companies. They were expensive, efficient, and completely ruthless. They were also supposedly on the same side as Her Majesty's government. Why would Blackstone want to kidnap a member of the royal family? Marcus asked, though he was already formulating several unpleasant theories. Crawford and Sarah exchanged glances before Crawford spoke. Because Princess Catherine discovered something she wasn't supposed to know. 6 weeks ago, she was working on her master's thesis about private military companies and their influence on British foreign policy. She requested access to certain classified documents through proper channels, documents that should have been heavily redacted before reaching her. But they weren't redacted, Marcus concluded. Someone made a mistake, Sarah continued. Or perhaps it wasn't a mistake. Either way, Catherine saw financial records showing that Blackstone has been receiving payments from the British government for operations that officially don't exist. Operations involving regime changes, corporate espionage, and what can only be described as state-sponsored assassination. Marcus set down the photographs and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. Outside, he could see the lights of London stretching into the distance. Millions of people sleeping peacefully, unaware that their government might be engaging in activities that would make the evening news very interesting indeed. How much does she know? He asked. Everything, Crawford said grimly. She's brilliant, Marcus. Once she saw the inconsistencies in the financial records, she started digging. She found bank transfers, communication intercepts, even video evidence of British officials coordinating with Blackstone operatives in countries where Britain officially has no military presence. And now Blackstone has her, Marcus said. The question is, what do they want? Money? The destruction of the evidence? Or something else entirely? Sarah activated a secure tablet and showed him a message that had been delivered to the palace through encrypted channels 12 hours earlier. The text was simple, but chilling. The princess has information that could damage important relationships. We propose a trade. The princess for the information. You have 72 hours to gather all copies of the documents she accessed, including any notes or copies she may have made. Further instructions will follow. Any attempt to involve law enforcement or intelligence services will result in unpleasant consequences for all parties involved. They're not asking for ransom, Marcus observed. They want to control the narrative. If this information becomes public, it won't just damage Blackstone. It will bring down the government and probably trigger the biggest political crisis in British history. Crawford nodded. The Prime Minister is aware of the situation. Officially, he's ordered us to comply with their demands. Unofficially, he's authorized us to use any means necessary to recover the princess and eliminate the threat. Which means they want her dead, Marcus said bluntly. Once they have the documents, Princess Catherine becomes a liability. She's seen their faces, knows their methods, and she's hardly the type to forget about something like this. That's why you're here, Sarah said. We need someone who can operate outside normal channels. Someone with the skills to infiltrate Blackstone and extract the princess before they realize we're not playing by their rules. Marcus studied the files again, noting the locations, the timing, the careful planning that had gone into infiltrating royal events. They've been planning this for months. This isn't just about covering up illegal operations. There's something bigger here. We think so too, Crawford agreed. Princess Catherine's research may have uncovered something that goes beyond mere government contracts. Something that could threaten the stability of the monarchy itself. What makes you say that? Sarah pulled up another set of documents on her tablet. Because 3 of the Blackstone operatives who attended royal functions have backgrounds in psychological operations and behavioral analysis. They weren't just gathering intelligence on security procedures. They were studying the royal family itself, their relationships, their vulnerabilities, their decision-making processes. Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. They're not just covering up past operations. They're planning something new, something that requires intimate knowledge of how the royal family functions. The question is what, Crawford said, and whether we can find Princess Catherine before they put their plan into motion. Marcus closed the files and looked at both of them. I'll need complete operational freedom. No oversight, no regular check-ins, and no political interference. If I'm going to infiltrate Blackstone and extract the princess, I need to be able to make decisions in real time without worrying about diplomatic consequences. Done, Crawford said immediately. I'll also need access to some resources that technically don't exist. Weapons, surveillance equipment, and a completely clean identity that will pass Blackstone's security screening. Already prepared, Sarah said, handing him a briefcase. Your legend is Thomas Whitmore, former Special Air Service, currently freelance security consultant with an impressive but entirely fabricated record of successful operations. Bank accounts, references, even a military service record that shows you were decorated for operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Marcus opened the briefcase and found everything he would need. Passport, credit cards, a Walther P99 with ceramic components that wouldn't trigger metal detectors, and a watch that contained enough explosive to blow open a reinforced door. The kind of equipment that officially didn't exist, but had saved his life on more than one occasion. Where do I start? He asked. Crawford pulled up a map of London on the wall display. Blackstone's London headquarters is in Canary Wharf, but their operational base is an industrial complex in East London that's officially listed as a shipping and logistics company. We believe Princess Catherine is being held there, but the facility is heavily guarded and completely off the grid. I can't just walk in and ask for a job application, Marcus pointed out. No, Sarah agreed, but Thomas Whitmore can. We've arranged for you to be recruited by Blackstone. Tomorrow morning, you'll receive a call from their Human Resources Department offering you a lucrative contract for a high-security assignment. The pay is excellent, the risks are minimal, and the client is extremely confidential. Let me guess, Marcus said. The assignment involves providing security for a high-value individual who requires discreet handling. Princess Catherine, Crawford confirmed. They're going to ask you to guard their prisoner, never realizing that you're actually there to rescue her. Marcus checked his watch. It was nearly 2 in the morning, which gave him perhaps 6 hours to prepare before beginning the most dangerous assignment of his career. What's my timeline? The 72-hour deadline expires in 60 hours, Sarah said. But we don't think they'll wait that long. Once they have what they want, they'll eliminate Princess Catherine and disappear. You probably have 48 hours at most. And if I can't extract her in time, Crawford's expression grew grim. Then, we'll be attending a funeral instead of a wedding. And the secrets that Princess Catherine discovered will die with her, leaving Blackstone free to continue whatever they're planning. Marcus stood and headed for the door, the weight of the mission settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. He had rescued hostages from terrorists, infiltrated criminal organizations, and survived more assassination attempts than he cared to count. But he had never tried to save a member of the royal family from a private army with unlimited resources and no moral constraints. One more thing, he said, turning back to Crawford and Sarah. If this goes wrong, if I'm captured or killed, make sure the press knows what really happened. Princess Catherine deserves that much. It won't go wrong, Sarah said, though her voice carried more hope than confidence. It might, Marcus replied honestly, but If it does, at least the truth will survive, even if we don't. He left them in their war room, surrounded by maps and computers and the weight of impossible decisions. Outside, London slept on, unaware that tomorrow would begin 48 hours that would determine not just the fate of a princess, but the future of the British monarchy itself. The call came at exactly 9:37 in the morning, just as Marcus finished his third cup of coffee and reviewed the Thomas Whitmore identity files one final time. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and completely without emotion. "Mr. Whitmore? This is Jennifer Hayes from Blackstone Security Solutions. We've reviewed your credentials and would like to discuss an immediate opportunity that matches your particular skill set. Would you be available for an interview this afternoon?" Marcus had spent the early morning hours studying Blackstone's corporate structure, their known associates, and, most importantly, their standard operating procedures for recruitment. Private military companies like Blackstone survived on their ability to quickly identify and recruit talent for specialized operations. They valued results over loyalty, efficiency over ethics. "I'm intrigued," Marcus replied, allowing a hint of interest to color his voice. "What type of operation are we discussing?" "The details are sensitive, Mr. Whitmore. I can tell you that the assignment involved providing security for a high-value individual in a controlled environment. The pay is £50,000 for 1 week's work, with the possibility of long-term contracts for exceptional performance." £50,000 for 1 week was an enormous sum, even by private security standards. It confirmed that whatever Blackstone was planning, they needed the best people available and were willing to pay accordingly. "When and where?" Marcus asked. "Our office is in Canary Wharf, level 42. 2 o'clock this afternoon. Ask for Ms. Hayes at reception." I should mention that the interview process will include a comprehensive background check and psychological evaluation. "We trust this won't be a problem." "Not at all," Marcus assured her, knowing that the intelligence services had spent considerable effort making Thomas Whitmore's background absolutely bulletproof. 3 hours later, Marcus stood in the lobby of Blackstone's impressive headquarters, watching streams of well-dressed executives and security personnel move through the marble-floored space with military precision. The building itself was a monument to corporate power, all glass and steel reaching toward the London sky like a crystal spear. Jennifer Hayes turned out to be a woman in her early 30s with sharp blue eyes and the kind of controlled posture that suggested extensive military training. She led him through security checkpoints that were more thorough than most airports, including biometric scans and a device that Marcus recognized as military-grade explosive detection equipment. "Impressive security," he commented as they rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. "We protect some very important people, Mr. Whitmore. Our clients expect discretion, and our employees require protection. The two requirements often overlap in interesting ways." The executive floor was a study in understated luxury. Original artwork lined the walls, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a high-end hotel rather than a security company. But Marcus noticed the subtle signs of serious security: reinforced windows, discreet camera placements, and doors that were heavier than they appeared. Hayes led him to a conference room where 2 other people waited. The first was a large man with the build of a professional athlete, and scars that suggested his experience hadn't been limited to training exercises. He introduced himself as David Morrison, Operations Director. The second was a woman with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes who gave her name as Dr. Sarah Chun, though Marcus suspected that wasn't her real name. "Mr. Whitmore," Morrison began, consulting a tablet that presumably contained Thomas Whitmore's fabricated but impressive service record. "Your background is exactly what we're looking for. Special operations experience, discretion, and a proven ability to handle sensitive assignments without asking unnecessary questions. I've found that asking unnecessary questions tends to complicate otherwise straightforward operations," Marcus replied. Dr. Chun leaned forward slightly. "This particular assignment requires someone who can maintain professional detachment while providing security for an individual who may be uncooperative." "Uncooperative how?" The subject is a young woman who has been involved in activities that pose a security risk to herself and others, Hayes explained carefully. She requires protective custody while we resolve certain complications related to her research activities. Marcus felt a surge of anger at their clinical description of Princess Catherine's kidnapping, but he kept his expression neutral. What kind of research? Morrison's eyes narrowed slightly. The less you know about the specifics, the better. Your job would be to ensure she remains safe and secure while our specialists handle the technical aspects of the situation. For £50,000, I assume she's considered extremely high value, Marcus observed. She is, Dr. Chun confirmed, which is why we need someone with your particular background. Someone who understands that sometimes protecting people requires protecting them from themselves. The interview continued for another hour, covering everything from Marcus's fictional military service to his theoretical approach to handling difficult security situations. They were thorough, professional, and completely ruthless in their evaluation. By the time it ended, Marcus was certain that Blackstone knew exactly what they were doing and had resources that went far beyond what appeared in their public corporate filings. "We'd like to offer you the position," Morrison said finally. "The assignment begins tonight. You'll be transported to our secure facility, where you'll receive a detailed briefing and meet your team members." "What about the psychological evaluation your Ms. Hayes mentioned?" Dr. Chen smiled, and Marcus realized she had been conducting it throughout the entire interview. "You've passed, Mr. Whitmore. Your psychological profile indicates someone who can follow orders without excessive moral complications while maintaining the professional judgment necessary for this type of work." 2 hours later, Marcus sat in the back of an unmarked van traveling through London's East End toward the industrial district where intelligence reports suggested Blackstone maintained their operational headquarters. The driver was a silent professional who had subjected Marcus to another thorough weapons search before allowing him into the vehicle. As they drove through increasingly isolated areas, Marcus used his watch to send a coded signal to Sarah Mitchell, confirming that he had successfully infiltrated Blackstone and was en route to the facility where Princess Catherine was presumably being held. The signal was brief and untraceable, but it would let the palace know that the rescue operation was moving forward. The Blackstone facility was larger and more sophisticated than Marcus had expected. What appeared from the outside to be a simple warehouse complex was actually a high-tech installation with multiple layers of security. Razor wire-topped electrified fences, guards patrolled with military precision, and camera clusters provided complete coverage of the surrounding area. Morrison met him at the main entrance and led him through another series of security checkpoints. The facility processes sensitive materials for various government and corporate clients, he explained as they walked through corridors lined with reinforced doors. "Most of our employees here are cleared for classified work, which means they understand the importance of discretion." "What kind of sensitive materials?" "The kind that certain people would prefer to keep private," Morrison replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. They stopped at a briefing room where Marcus was introduced to his team members. There were 4 others, 2 former military police officers named Jackson and Williams, a surveillance specialist called Martinez, and a communications expert who gave his name as Thompson. All of them had the hard-edged competence of people who had seen serious action and survived to profit from it. "Your assignment is simple," Morrison explained, activating a wall display that showed a floor plan of part of the facility. "Level B, 2, Section 7. 1 subject, 1 room, continuous monitoring. 8-hour shifts, 3 teams, complete coverage. The subject has been cooperative so far, but she's intelligent and resourceful. Don't underestimate her." Jackson, the larger of the 2 former military police officers, raised his hand. "What's our rules of engagement if she attempts to escape?" "Minimum necessary force to maintain security," Morrison replied. "She's valuable alive and unharmed, significantly less valuable otherwise." Marcus studied the floor plan, noting the security features and potential vulnerabilities. Level B, 2 was underground, accessible only through a single elevator that required keycard access. Section 7 appeared to be isolated from the rest of the facility, with its own air circulation and power systems. It was designed to hold someone securely, while keeping them completely cut off from the outside world. "When do we start?" Marcus asked. "Now," Morrison said, handing him a key card and a communication device. "Your shift begins in 30 minutes. Jackson and Williams will show you the procedures." The elevator descent to level B2 took longer than Marcus expected, suggesting they were going deeper underground than the floor plan indicated. When the doors opened, he found himself in a corridor that looked more like a high-security medical facility than a warehouse basement. The walls were painted institutional green, the lighting was bright and even, and he could hear the hum of sophisticated air circulation systems. Section 7 consisted of 5 rooms, a monitoring station, 2 guard posts, a small kitchen and rest area, and, at the end of the corridor, a single door marked only with the number 7. Jackson swiped his key card and led Marcus into the monitoring station, where multiple screens showed different angles of the room beyond. Princess Catherine sat at a small desk, reading what appeared to be a book. She was dressed in simple civilian clothes, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked tired but alert, and Marcus could see the intelligence in her dark eyes as she occasionally glanced toward the cameras. Even in captivity, she maintained a natural dignity that made her one of the most photographed members of the royal family. "She's been like that for hours," Williams explained. Writing in that notebook, occasionally pacing. She asked for specific books, usually technical stuff about international law or political science. Smart as hell, but she hasn't caused any trouble. "What's she writing?" Marcus asked. "No idea," Jackson replied. "We're supposed to monitor her physical security, not read over her shoulder. Orders from upstairs." Marcus spent the next several hours observing Princess Catherine and learning the facility's security procedures. The monitoring systems were sophisticated but not perfect. There were blind spots in the camera coverage, and the electronic locks could potentially be bypassed by someone with the right equipment and knowledge. During his break, he managed to send another coded message to Sarah Mitchell, providing details about the facility's location, security arrangements, and Princess Catherine's apparent physical condition. He also requested extraction support for the following evening, when he planned to make his move. The response came back quickly. "Understood. Support will be available. Exercise extreme caution. Recent intelligence suggests Blackstone timeline may be accelerated." As Marcus returned to his monitoring duties, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Dr. Chun had arrived at the facility and was setting up equipment in one of the adjacent rooms. The equipment included what appeared to be medical monitoring devices and several cases that Marcus recognized as containing drugs used for interrogation and memory suppression. Morrison joined him in the monitoring station as the second shift ended. "Dr. Chun will be conducting some tests with our subject tomorrow," he explained casually. "Nothing dramatic, just some standard psychological evaluations." "What kind of tests?" Marcus asked. "The kind that help people forget things that might be troubling them," Morrison replied. "Our client is concerned that the subject has been exposed to information that could cause her significant distress. We're simply helping her move past that trauma." Marcus understood immediately what Morrison was really saying. Blackstone intended to use chemical interrogation to extract every detail of what Princess Catherine had learned, and then they planned to destroy her memories of it entirely. She would be returned to her family as a psychologically damaged shell of herself, with no recollection of the evidence that could destroy both Blackstone and the government officials who had hired them. "When?" Marcus asked. "Tomorrow evening. Dr. Chun prefers to work at night when the subject is naturally more vulnerable to suggestion." Marcus nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable, while internally calculating how much time he had to extract Princess Catherine before Blackstone's experts turned her into a living ghost. The timeline had just become significantly more urgent. As the night shift settled into routine, Marcus began to implement his escape plan. It would require precise timing, significant luck, and the kind of ruthless efficiency that had made him one of Her Majesty's most effective agents. But as he watched Princess Catherine through the monitors, seeing her quiet dignity even in captivity, he knew that failure was not an option. Tomorrow evening, one way or another, Princess Catherine would either walk out of this facility as herself, or Marcus would die trying to make it happen. Marcus spent the morning hours studying every detail of Blackstone's facility, memorizing guard rotations, identifying electronic vulnerabilities, and mapping potential escape routes. His cover as Thomas Whitmore gave him legitimate access to most areas of the complex, and his supposed expertise in security systems provided perfect justification for his detailed observations. During his break, he discovered that the facility was far larger than it appeared from the outside. Underground levels extended deep into the earth, connected by a maze of corridors that served different operational functions. Level B, one housed communications and surveillance equipment. Level B, 3 contained what appeared to be a sophisticated weapons storage and maintenance facility. Level B, 4 was restricted access only, but Marcus glimpsed enough through briefly opened doors to realize it contained holding cells and interrogation rooms designed for far more serious purposes than Princess Catherine's comfortable imprisonment. The true scope of Blackstone's operations became clearer as Marcus observed the personnel moving through the facility. These weren't just security contractors hired for corporate protection work. They were former Special Forces operators, intelligence specialists, and technical experts who had been recruited from the world's most elite military and intelligence organizations. The facility wasn't just a headquarters. It was a private army with capabilities that rivaled most government agencies. At noon, Dr. Chin requested that Marcus assist with moving some equipment into Princess Catherine's section. As they wheeled medical monitoring devices and computer systems down the corridor, she made casual conversation that was anything but casual. "You have an interesting background, Mr. Whitmore," she said, consulting the tablet that contained his fabricated service record. "Special operations in Afghanistan, counterterrorism work in Iraq, and then a rather abrupt transition to private security. What motivated the career change?" Marcus had prepared for this question. Government work became too restrictive. Too many rules, too much oversight, not enough appreciation for results. Private sector offers better compensation for people willing to do what needs to be done. And you're comfortable with assignments that might require moral flexibility? "I'm comfortable with assignments that pay well and don't involve unnecessary complications," Marcus replied carefully. Dr. Chin smiled as they reached the door to Section 7. "Good, because this particular operation requires someone who understands that sometimes the greater good requires difficult decisions." Through the reinforced window, Marcus could see Princess Catherine sitting at her desk, writing in the notebook that had become her constant companion. She looked up as they approached, and for a brief moment, her eyes met his through the glass. He saw intelligence there, and determination, and something that might have been hope. "She's remarkable," Dr. Chin observed, following his gaze. "Brilliant mind, strong will, and unfortunately for everyone involved, an overdeveloped sense of moral obligation." She could have simply forgotten what she saw in those classified documents. Instead, she chose to investigate further. What exactly did she discover? Marcus asked, hoping to gain more information about the scope of Princess Catherine's knowledge. "Evidence of operations that certain people would prefer to remain classified," Dr. Chun replied diplomatically. "Nothing that threatens national security, you understand. Simply business arrangements that might be misunderstood by people who don't appreciate the complexities of modern geopolitics." Marcus understood that Dr. Chun was lying, but he also understood that pushing for more details would raise suspicions about Thomas Whitmore's motivation. Private security contractors were supposed to ask practical questions about payment and procedures, not philosophical questions about the morality of their assignments. The afternoon brought new complications. Morrison informed the security team that their timeline had been moved up due to external pressures that require immediate resolution. Dr. Chin's interrogation and memory suppression session would begin at 8 o'clock that evening instead of the originally planned late-night schedule. The client is concerned about potential interference from outside parties, Morrison explained during the briefing. We need to complete our work with the subject and transfer her to secure medical care as quickly as possible. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The accelerated timeline meant that his rescue operation would have to begin in just a few hours, during the busiest part of the facility's operational schedule. It also meant that someone at Blackstone suspected that Princess Catherine's disappearance was being investigated more aggressively than they had anticipated. At 6 o'clock, Marcus sent his final coded message to Sarah Mitchell. Timeline accelerated. Beginning extraction at 2000 hours. Prepare emergency medical support. Subject may require treatment for chemical interrogation effects. The response was immediate. Understood. Support teams in position. Good luck. As the evening shift change began, Marcus put his plan into motion. The first phase required disabling the facility's backup power systems without triggering immediate alarms. He had identified the electrical maintenance room during his earlier reconnaissance, and Thomas Whitmore's supposed expertise in security systems provided perfect justification for inspecting the power distribution equipment. The maintenance room was located on level B1, adjacent to the communications center. Marcus entered using his key card and quickly located the backup generator control panel. Using a small device concealed in his watch, he installed a time-delayed power interruption system that would shut down the backup generators exactly 20 minutes after activation, but only after the main power was interrupted. Phase 2 required positioning himself in the monitoring station during the critical window when Dr. Chun would be preparing Princess Catherine for interrogation. Marcus volunteered to cover the early part of Jackson's shift, claiming he wanted to observe Dr. Chin's procedures for professional development purposes. At exactly 7:45, Dr. Chin arrived at Section 7 with a wheeled cart containing medical equipment and what Marcus recognized as several different chemical compounds used for interrogation and memory suppression. She was accompanied by 2 medical technicians and Morrison, who carried a briefcase that presumably contained additional specialized equipment. This shouldn't take long, Morrison told Marcus as they prepared to enter Princess Catherine's room. Dr. Chun is extremely efficient with these procedures. The subject will be unconscious within minutes and completely compliant throughout the process. Marcus watched through the monitors as Dr. Chin entered Princess Catherine's room. The princess looked up from her notebook as they wheeled in the medical equipment, and Marcus could see her expression change as she realized what was about to happen. Your Highness, Dr. Chin said politely, I'm Dr. Chin. I'm here to help you with some memory issues that have been causing you distress. I'm not distressed about my memories, Princess Catherine replied calmly. I'm distressed about what those memories reveal about people I trusted. Nevertheless, Dr. Chun continued, preparing a syringe with practiced efficiency. We're going to help you forget some things that are troubling you. You'll feel much better afterward. Marcus activated his power interruption device and began counting. In exactly 20 minutes, the facility's backup systems would fail, plunging Section 7 into darkness and disabling the electronic locks that secured Princess Catherine's door. He would have perhaps 90 seconds before emergency power restored the security systems. Princess Catherine stood as Dr. Chun approached with the syringe. I demand to speak with someone from the British Embassy. I am a member of the royal family, and I am being held against my will by people who are engaged in illegal activities that threaten British national security. Your Highness, Morrison said patiently, you're suffering from false memories caused by exposure to fabricated documents designed to create exactly this kind of paranoid response. Dr. Chen's treatment will restore your normal psychological state. The documents weren't fabricated, Princess Catherine said firmly. I have copies hidden in 7 different locations, along with detailed analysis that proves Blackstone has been conducting illegal operations with the knowledge and cooperation of senior government officials. Dr. Chun paused in her preparations. What kind of copies? Digital files, physical documents, and video recordings of British officials coordinating with Blackstone operatives. Everything needed to prove that Her Majesty's government has been engaging in activities that violate both British law and international treaties. Marcus saw Morrison and Dr. Chun exchange glances. Princess Catherine had just revealed that destroying her memory wouldn't be sufficient to protect Blackstone's secrets. They would need to recover the hidden evidence as well, which meant keeping her conscious and cooperative long enough to extract the locations. Where are these copies hidden? Morrison asked. In places where they'll be found if anything happens to me, Princess Catherine replied. People who know to look for them if I disappear or if I'm returned to my family with convenient memory problems. Marcus realized that Princess Catherine was buying time, trying to convince her captors that killing her or erasing her memory would create more problems than it solved. But he also knew that Blackstone's interrogation techniques could extract any information they wanted, regardless of her resistance. The power interruption timer showed 15 minutes remaining. In a monitoring station, Marcus could see that Morrison was making phone calls, presumably reporting this new development to whoever was ultimately responsible for the operation. Dr. Chun had set aside her syringe and was instead preparing what appeared to be a more aggressive chemical cocktail designed for immediate interrogation rather than memory suppression. Your Highness, Dr. Chun said, I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to answer them truthfully. If you cooperate, this process will be relatively comfortable. If you resist, it will be significantly more unpleasant. I'm not going to cooperate with kidnappers and war criminals, Princess Catherine replied. 10 minutes remaining. Marcus could see that Dr. Chun was growing impatient with Princess Catherine's resistance. The medical technicians were preparing restraints, and Morrison had returned with additional security personnel. Whatever had been planned as a subtle memory modification was evolving into a full-scale interrogation with potential for serious physical harm. 5 minutes remaining. Marcus checked his equipment one final time. Ceramic knife, lock-picking tools, small explosive charges, and the Walther P99 with its specialized ammunition. He would have one chance to extract Princess Catherine before Blackstone's security forces overwhelmed him. 2 minutes remaining. Dr. Chun had given up on voluntary cooperation and was approaching Princess Catherine with a syringe filled with what Marcus recognized as a powerful interrogation drug that would make resistance impossible, but could cause permanent neurological damage. 1 minute remaining. Marcus left the monitoring station and moved towards Section 7, using his key card to pass through the security checkpoints. In 60 seconds, the backup power would fail, the electronic locks would disengage, and Princess Catherine's rescue would either succeed or result in both their deaths. 30 seconds. Marcus reached the door to Section 7 and positioned himself where he could move quickly when the locks disengaged. 10 seconds. Through the window, he could see Dr. Chun injecting Princess Catherine with the interrogation drug while Morrison and the security personnel prepared their equipment. 5 seconds. Princess Catherine looked directly at the security camera, and Marcus realized she somehow knew what was about to happen. 0. The lights went out, the electronic locks disengaged with a soft click, and Marcus burst through the door into complete darkness. Princess Catherine's rescue had begun, and the next 90 seconds would determine whether they both lived to see morning. The moment the facility plunged into darkness, Marcus moved with the precision of 15 years' experience in close-quarters combat. He had memorized the exact layout of Princess Catherine's room during his surveillance shifts, and he navigated the darkness using muscle memory and the faint emergency lighting that flickered on after 30 seconds. Dr. Chen's voice cut through the confusion. Security. Someone get the emergency power restored immediately. Marcus reached Princess Catherine's position just as she kicked over the medical cart, sending syringes and monitoring equipment crashing to the floor. Even partially affected by the interrogation drug, she retained enough presence of mind to create additional chaos for their captors. Your Highness, Marcus whispered urgently in her ear, I'm Agent Sterling, Her Majesty's Secret Service. Can you move? The drug, she gasped, makes everything feel distant, but yes. Marcus helped her to her feet, just as the emergency lighting brightened enough to reveal the room's occupants. Morrison was shouting orders in his radio while Dr. Chun tried to salvage her equipment. The two medical technicians were stumbling around in confusion, and the additional security personnel were attempting to establish defensive positions without knowing what they were defending against. "This way," Marcus said, guiding Princess Catherine toward the door. But Morrison had positioned himself between them and their escape route, and he was reaching for the weapon holstered under his jacket. Marcus drew his ceramic knife and threw it in one fluid motion. The blade caught Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon sliding across the floor. Before anyone else could react, Marcus activated one of his small explosive charges, blowing out the room's internal lights and plunging them back into near-total darkness. "Move!" Marcus ordered, guiding Princess Catherine through the doorway and into the corridor beyond. They had perhaps 40 seconds before the backup power systems restored the electronic locks and security cameras. Marcus led Princess Catherine toward the emergency stairwell at the far end of the corridor, but they had only covered half the distance when the lights flickered back on and alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Section 7 Breach. Morrison's voice echoed from the facility's intercom system. "All personnel to Level B2. Subject is attempting escape with unknown assistance." Marcus could hear boots pounding down the main corridor as Blackstone security forces responded to the alert. The stairwell was still 20 meters away, and Princess Catherine was moving more slowly than normal due to the interrogation drug affecting her coordination. "Can you run?" Marcus asked. "I can try," she replied, though her words were slightly slurred. They reached the stairwell just as armed security personnel emerged from the main elevator. Marcus pushed Princess Catherine through the fire door and immediately activated his second explosive charge, sealing the stairwell entrance behind them. The explosion wouldn't hold Blackstone's forces for long, but it might buy them enough time to reach the surface. The stairwell was a concrete shaft that extended from Level B4 to the facility's ground floor. Marcus and Princess Catherine began climbing, but they had only reached Level B1 when they heard the distinctive sound of the sealed door being blown open below them. "They're in the stairwell," a voice shouted from below. "All exits are being sealed. They're trapped." Marcus realized that Blackstone's security forces had anticipated the possibility of an escape attempt through the stairwell and had prepared accordingly. The ground floor exit would be heavily guarded, and they would never reach it before being overtaken by their pursuers. "This way," Marcus said, guiding Princess Catherine through the fire door onto Level B1. Instead of continuing toward the surface, they would have to find an alternative escape route through the facility's underground levels. Level B1 housed the facility's communications and surveillance center, a maze of server rooms, monitoring stations, and technical equipment that provided some cover from their pursuers. Marcus led Princess Catherine through the corridors, looking for any access point that might lead to the surface or to a defensible position where they could make a stand. "Agent Sterling," Princess Catherine said as they moved through the electronic maze, "there's something you need to know about what I discovered. Blackstone isn't just covering up illegal operations. They're planning something that will directly threaten the royal family." "What kind of threat?" "Assassination," she replied bluntly. "Not just me. They have detailed plans for eliminating multiple members of the royal family during the state visit next month. They're going to make it look like a terrorist attack, but it's actually designed to install a more cooperative government that will give them unlimited access to British military resources." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground facility's air conditioning. If Princess Catherine was correct, her kidnapping was just the beginning of a much larger conspiracy that threatened the very foundation of the British constitutional system. "How do you know this?" he asked as they reached the communications center. The classified documents included operational planning files that Blackstone thought were encrypted beyond recognition. "But I have a master's degree in computer science, and I recognize the encryption algorithm. Once I broke the code, I found detailed assassination scenarios, timeline proposals, and lists of government officials who would need to be eliminated or compromised to ensure the plan's success. They reached the main communications center, where banks of computer servers hummed with encrypted data transmissions. Marcus realized this might be their opportunity to not only escape, but also to gather evidence that could expose the entire conspiracy. "Can you access these systems?" Marcus asked. "Possibly," Princess Catherine replied, though the interrogation drug was still affecting her concentration. "But it would take time we don't have." The sound of boots and shouted orders was getting closer as Blackstone's security forces systematically searched Level B1. Marcus estimated they had perhaps 10 minutes before being discovered, and possibly less if their pursuers decided to use more aggressive search methods. "There," Princess Catherine said, pointing to a workstation that appeared to be accessing external networks. "That terminal has active connections to Blackstone's main servers. If I can bypass their security protocols, I might be able to copy some of the assassination planning files." Marcus positioned himself at the communications center entrance while Princess Catherine worked at the computer terminal. Through the reinforced windows, he could see security teams moving through adjacent corridors with military precision, checking every room and storage area. "How long do you need?" Marcus asked. 5 minutes if their security protocols are standard," Princess Catherine replied, her fingers moving across the keyboard with increasing confidence as the interrogation drug began to wear off. 15 minutes if they're using military-grade encryption." They didn't have 15 minutes. Marcus could see the security teams approaching the communications center, and he knew that once they were discovered, Princess Catherine would never have the opportunity to complete her work on the computer systems. "Take whatever you can get in the next 2 minutes," Marcus said, preparing his remaining weapons for what would likely be their final confrontation. Princess Catherine's computer skills proved as impressive as her academic credentials suggested. Within 90 seconds, she had bypassed multiple security layers and gained access to what appeared to be Blackstone's operational planning database. "I've found it," she said urgently. "Operation Royal Flush. Complete assassination protocols for the Queen, Prince of Wales, and 6 other senior royals. Timeline shows execution during the state dinner next month, when they'll all be in the same location." "Can you copy the files?" "Copying now," she confirmed, "but the files are enormous. Complete architectural plans, security assessments, personnel assignments, even contingency protocols for different political scenarios following the assassinations." The security teams had reached the corridor outside the communications center. Marcus could hear them communicating through radio headsets as they prepared to enter the room where he and Princess Catherine were trapped. 30 more seconds, Princess Catherine said, watching the file transfer progress indicator. "We don't have 30 seconds, Marcus replied, seeing the first security operatives positioning themselves outside the reinforced door. The door exploded inward as Blackstone's forces used shaped charges to gain entry. Marcus responded immediately, using his final explosive charge to destroy a section of the server room wall and create an escape route into the adjacent facility maintenance area. "Run!" Marcus shouted, pushing Princess Catherine through the hole in the wall as gunfire erupted behind them. The maintenance area was a maze of pipes, electrical conduits, and ventilation systems that served the entire underground facility. It was also connected to utility tunnels that led to other buildings in the industrial complex, providing potential escape routes that Blackstone security forces might not have anticipated. Marcus led Princess Catherine through the mechanical maze, following utility markings that indicated connections to external systems. Behind them, they could hear their pursuers struggling to navigate the narrow passages and complex layout of the maintenance areas. "Did the file transfer complete?" Marcus asked as they reached what appeared to be a main utility tunnel. "Yes," Princess Catherine confirmed, holding up a small storage device. "Everything. Assassination plans, personnel lists, financial records, communications logs. Enough evidence to expose the entire conspiracy and everyone involved in it." The utility tunnel extended for several hundred meters before reaching a maintenance access point that led to the surface. Marcus and Princess Catherine emerged through a concealed entrance behind a storage building approximately half a kilometer from Blackstone's main facility. It was nearly midnight, and the industrial district was largely deserted except for the occasional security patrol. Marcus activated his emergency communication device and transmitted a coded signal that would bring Sarah Mitchell and her support team to their location. "Agent Sterling," Princess Catherine said as they waited in the shadows, "there's something else you need to know. The assassination plan includes protocols for eliminating anyone who attempts to investigate Blackstone's activities. That includes you, Sarah Mitchell, and Sir Reginald Crawford." Marcus felt the full scope of the conspiracy settling on him like a weight. Blackstone hadn't just planned to eliminate the royal family. They had anticipated that their activities would eventually be discovered and had prepared to eliminate everyone involved in the investigation. 20 minutes later, Sarah Mitchell arrived with a full extraction team, including medical personnel, communication specialists, and enough armed support to discourage any pursuit attempt by Blackstone's forces. Princess Catherine was immediately taken to a secure medical facility for treatment and debriefing, while Marcus began the process of analyzing the evidence they had recovered. But as their convoy disappeared into London's network of secure government facilities, Marcus realized that their escape from Blackstone was only the beginning. The real challenge would be exposing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of British government, while protecting the royal family from assassins who had unlimited resources and no moral constraints. The evidence Princess Catherine had recovered would either save the monarchy or get them all killed. Either way, the next few days would determine the future of Britain itself. The secure briefing room beneath Westminster was filled with the most powerful people in Britain, yet the atmosphere was one of barely controlled panic. The Queen sat at the head of the conference table, her expression grave but determined. Around her were the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Director General of MI5, and Sir Reginald Crawford. Princess Catherine sat beside Marcus, both of them showing the effects of their ordeal, but alert and focused on the evidence spread across the table. "The assassination plan is scheduled for the state dinner in 12 days, Princess Catherine reported, her voice steady despite everything she had endured. "They've spent months infiltrating the security arrangements, placing their operatives in key positions, and developing contingency protocols for different scenarios." The Prime Minister, a man whose political career had been built on managing crises, looked older than his 60 years as he studied the documents Princess Catherine had recovered. "How many people are involved in this conspiracy?" "At least 47 individuals in government positions," Marcus replied, consulting the personnel list they had decoded. "Ministers, senior civil servants, military officers, and intelligence officials. All of them receiving payment from Blackstone in exchange for access and cooperation." The Home Secretary leaned forward, her face pale. "Some of these names are people I've worked with for decades. People I trusted with national security decisions. Blackstone recruited them systematically over the past 5 years," Princess Catherine explained. "They identified officials who were facing financial pressures, personal scandals, or career disappointments, then offered them solutions in exchange for future cooperation. Most of them probably never realized they were participating in a conspiracy to overthrow the government." The Queen spoke for the first time since the briefing began. "What is their ultimate objective? Why kill members of the royal family?" Marcus activated a wall display showing Blackstone's organizational structure and financial connections, control of British foreign policy, and military resources. "The assassinations are designed to create a political crisis that will bring down the current government and install officials who are already compromised by Blackstone. Once they control key ministries, they can use British military forces to protect their commercial interests around the world, essentially turning Britain into a private military company with nuclear weapons," the Director General of MI5 added grimly. Sir Reginald Crawford had been studying the timeline documents with increasing alarm. "They've planned for every contingency. If the assassinations fail, they have backup protocols for kidnapping. If kidnapping fails, they have planned for discrediting the royal family through manufactured scandals. They're determined to neutralize the monarchy as an independent political institution. The prime minister stood and began pacing, a habit that his staff recognized as a sign of extreme stress. How do we stop them? We can't arrest 47 government officials without proof that would stand up in court, and we can't protect the royal family indefinitely without destroying the public functions that define constitutional monarchy. We use their plan against them, Princess Catherine said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Despite being the youngest person in the room and the most recently traumatized, she had been thinking strategically about their options since her rescue. Explain, the Queen said. Blackstone's plan depends on the element of surprise and the assumption that we don't know what they're planning. But we do know. We know the date, the method, the personnel involved, and their contingency protocols. We can turn their assassination attempt into a trap that exposes the entire conspiracy. Marcus immediately understood what Princess Catherine was proposing, but he also understood the enormous risks involved. You're suggesting we allow the assassination attempt to proceed, but in a controlled environment where we can capture the operatives and document their connections to government officials. It's the only way to gather evidence that will stand up in court, Princess Catherine confirmed. If we simply arrest people based on the documents I recovered, they'll claim the evidence was fabricated. But if we catch them in the act of attempting to murder the royal family, with full documentation of their planning and coordination, no court in the world will question their guilt. The Home Secretary looked horrified. You're talking about using members of the royal family as bait in a sting operation. The risks are enormous. The risks of doing nothing are greater, the Queen said firmly. If we don't expose this conspiracy completely, they'll simply modify their plans and try again. And next time, we might not have advance warning. The Director General of MI5 was already formulating operational details. We could stage the state dinner as planned, but with enhanced security that appears normal to outside observers. Every guest, every staff member, every security officer would be vetted and monitored. We could document every aspect of the assassination attempt while ensuring that it fails. What about the government officials who are involved? The Prime Minister asked. If we're monitoring their communications and coordination with Blackstone, we'll be collecting evidence of treason at the highest levels of government. That's exactly what we need, Marcus said. Complete documentation of who gave the orders, who provided the access, and who coordinated the cover-up. This conspiracy goes beyond Blackstone. It includes people who swore oaths to protect the crown and then betrayed those oaths for money. Over the next 6 hours, they developed a comprehensive plan that would require the coordination of multiple intelligence agencies, military units, and police organizations. The state dinner would proceed as scheduled, but every aspect of it would be controlled and monitored. Blackstone's operatives would be allowed to implement their assassination plan until the moment they actually attempted to harm members of the royal family, at which point overwhelming force would neutralize the threat and capture the conspirators. Princess Catherine insisted on participating despite the obvious dangers. They know I discover their plans. If I'm not present at the dinner, they'll realize something is wrong and abort the operation. We need them to believe that their conspiracy is still secret. The Queen studied her granddaughter with obvious pride and concern. You understand that you'll be in genuine danger throughout the evening. Even with all our precautions, there's always the possibility that something will go wrong. I understand, Princess Catherine replied. But this conspiracy threatens everything our family represents. Constitutional monarchy, parliamentary democracy, the rule of law. If we don't stop them completely, we'll lose more than our lives. We'll lose the country. The next 12 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation and anxiety. Marcus worked with MI5 and military intelligence to identify every Blackstone operative who had infiltrated the state dinner security arrangements. Princess Catherine continued her normal public schedule while secretly wearing sophisticated monitoring equipment that documented every attempt by Blackstone agents to gather intelligence about her activities. The government officials involved in the conspiracy were placed under discreet surveillance that revealed the full scope of their betrayal. Ministers were recorded, discussing timing details with Blackstone coordinators. Military officers were photographed transferring security protocols to unauthorized personnel. Intelligence officials were caught using classified communication systems to coordinate the assassination planning. 3 days before the state dinner, Marcus received intelligence that made the stakes even higher. Blackstone had backup plans that extended beyond Britain. Similar conspiracies were being implemented in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, designed to neutralize the constitutional monarchies throughout the Commonwealth and replace them with governments controlled by private military contractors. This isn't just about Britain, Marcus reported during the final planning session. It's about dismantling the entire Commonwealth system and replacing it with corporate control. If they succeed here, they'll have a template for overthrowing democratic governments around the world. On the evening of the state dinner, Buckingham Palace was transformed into the most heavily monitored location on Earth. Every guest, staff member, and security officer was equipped with discreet tracking devices. Every conversation was recorded, every movement was filmed, and every electronic communication was intercepted and analyzed in real time. Marcus, wearing formal evening dress that concealed an impressive array of weapons and communication equipment, positioned himself among the security personnel responsible for protecting the royal family. Princess Catherine, elegant in a blue evening gown that contained more surveillance equipment than most intelligence agencies possessed, moved through the reception with apparent calm, while internally tracking every Blackstone operative in the room. The assassination attempt began at exactly 9:37, just as the dessert course was being served. A coordinated power failure plunged the state dining room into darkness, while specially trained Blackstone operatives moved toward predetermined positions around the royal family's table. But instead of chaos and confusion, the operatives found themselves facing the most elite special forces soldiers in the British military, equipped with night vision equipment and precise intelligence about Blackstone's movements and intentions. The assassination attempt lasted exactly 90 seconds before every conspirator was captured or neutralized. In the weeks that followed, the evidence gathered during the operation led to the largest treason prosecution in British history. 47 government officials were convicted of conspiracy to commit regicide, along with hundreds of Blackstone personnel and financial supporters around the world. The company itself was dissolved, its assets seized, and its international operations dismantled by coordinated law enforcement action across 17 countries. The private military industry underwent fundamental reforms designed to prevent any similar conspiracy from threatening democratic governments. Princess Catherine returned to her academic studies, but also accepted a new role as special advisor to the Queen on security affairs. Her master's thesis on private military companies became the foundation for international treaties restricting the activities of mercenary organizations. Marcus received a knighthood for his service to the crown, though the specific details of his actions remained classified for national security reasons. He continued his work with the Secret Service, but with a new appreciation for the complexities of protecting not just individual members of the royal family, but the constitutional principles they represented. 6 months later, as Marcus stood in the same palace briefing room where the crisis had begun, he reflected on how close Britain had come to losing everything that defined it as a free and democratic society. The conspiracy had been stopped, the conspirators had been brought to justice, and the monarchy had survived its greatest challenge in centuries. But he also understood that the price of freedom was eternal vigilance, and that there would always be people willing to trade democracy for profit, constitutional government for personal power, and the rule of law for the rule of money. The Queen's Secret Service would continue its work, protecting not just the royal family, but the principles they embodied. And if another threat emerged, another conspiracy developed, or another group of mercenaries decided that Britain's democracy was for sale, they would be ready. Because some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for, and worth preserving for future generations. The crown, the Constitution, and the country they served would endure, protected by people willing to sacrifice everything to ensure that freedom survived. Princess Catherine's courage had saved not just her own life, but the life of British democracy itself. And Marcus Sterling, Agent 007, would spend the rest of his career making sure that her sacrifice had not been in vain.